In the midst of the Cold War, a new conflict was brewing in the Middle East. The Iran-Iraq War had just ended, leaving both nations severely weakened. Iraq, burdened with a colossal war debt, turned its gaze towards its rich neighbor, Kuwait. Claiming that the tiny nation was historically a part of its territory, Iraq began to flex its military muscle. The tension escalated, and in August of 1990, Iraq launched a full-scale invasion of Kuwait. The world watched in shock as the small but prosperous nation was swiftly overrun. The United Nations in response was quick to condemn the act of aggression, but this wasn't just about a rogue nation overstepping its boundaries. This was about the balance of power in a strategically vital region, the Middle East. The world couldn't stand by and watch. This set the stage for an unprecedented international response known as Operation Desert Storm. In response to Iraq's aggression, an international coalition formed, spearheaded by the United States. It was a gathering of nations, united by a common cause, to halt the unprovoked invasion and restore peace in the region. The coalition was an impressive ensemble comprising 35 nations from across the globe. Notably, it included several Arab countries, standing shoulder to shoulder with Western powers, symbolizing a global stance against territorial aggression. The United Nations played a pivotal role in legitimizing the coalition's objective. The UN Resolution 678 was passed, granting the coalition the right to use all necessary means, including force, to eject Iraq from Kuwait. This resolution, coupled with the coalition's formation, signaled a clear message to Iraq and the world. The international community would not stand by idly in the face of aggression. With the world watching, Operation Desert Storm officially began on January 17, 1991. The first phase of Operation Desert Storm was an intensive air campaign. This phase was designed with clear and strategic objectives, all aimed at crippling Iraq's capacity to wage war. The primary goal was to disable Iraq's command and communication structures, the very nerves and brain of its military. Without the ability to command and control, an army, no matter how large or well-equipped, is reduced to a disorganized mass. In the vast desert terrain, where coordination and communication are key, this would prove a critical blow. But that was not the sole focus of this air campaign. The coalition forces also targeted Iraq's formidable air defenses. The Iraqi Air Force was one of the largest in the region and boasted an array of both Soviet and French aircraft. The coalition knew that gaining air superiority was crucial to protect their own forces and to allow for unhindered operation of their aircraft over Iraqi skies. The third key objective was the destruction of Iraq's infrastructure. This included power plants, bridges, and roads, all critical elements to support a war effort. By systematically dismantling these, the coalition sought to further weaken Iraq's ability to fight, crippling their logistics and morale. This air campaign was not just remarkable for its objectives, but also for the technology it employed. Cutting-edge tools of warfare, such as stealth bombers, were used extensively. These bombers, invisible to radar, could penetrate deep into enemy territory undetected, delivering devastating payloads with impunity. On another front, the coalition forces made extensive use of precision-guided munitions. These smart bombs, with their ability to hit specific targets with pinpoint accuracy, minimized collateral damage and maximized the impact on military targets. For 5 weeks, this relentless air campaign continued day and night. The skies over Iraq were filled with the roar of jet engines and the deadly whistling of falling bombs. The once formidable Iraqi military machine was being systematically dismantled from the air. After 5 weeks of relentless bombing, the stage was set for the ground campaign. The coalition launched its ground offensive on February 24th with a feint attack into Kuwait. This was not an arbitrary move, but a carefully designed strategy to mislead the Iraqi forces. While the feint attack drew the attention of the Iraqis towards Kuwait, the main coalition forces were preparing for a sweeping left hook maneuver into Iraq itself. This left hook strategy was the brainchild of General Norman Schwarzkopf, the commander of the coalition forces. His plan was to bypass the heavily fortified Kuwaiti-Iraqi border and instead penetrate into Iraq from the west. This was a bold move, a strategic gamble that would either lead to a swift victory or a prolonged conflict. General Schwarzkopf's gamble paid off. With the Iraqi forces distracted by the feint attack in Kuwait, the main coalition forces executed the left hook maneuver with remarkable precision. They penetrated deep into Iraq, cutting off and encircling the Iraqi forces in Kuwait. This brilliant strategic maneuver effectively isolated the Iraqi forces, making them easy targets for the coalition's superior firepower. The ground offensive was a resounding success. The coalition forces, armed with superior technology and led by brilliant strategists, overwhelmed the Iraqi forces in less than 100 hours. The rapid pace of the ground offensive surprised even the most optimistic strategists. In fact, the speed of the coalition's advance was so swift that it left the Iraqi forces in disarray, unable to mount a coordinated defense. And then, on February 28, just 4 days after the ground offensive began, President George H.W. Bush made a historic announcement. He declared a ceasefire, effectively ending Operation Desert Storm. This marked the end of one of the shortest yet most decisive military campaigns in modern history. The coalition had achieved its primary objective, the liberation of Kuwait from Iraqi occupation. On February 28, President George H.W. Bush declared a ceasefire, effectively ending Operation Desert Storm. And with that, a critical chapter in the history of the Middle East was written, its echoes still reverberating to this day. Operation Desert Storm was a decisive victory for the coalition, but it left a lasting impact on the region and the world. In the aftermath of the war, Iraq was a nation in shambles. Infrastructure lay in ruins, and the relentless sanctions imposed by the United Nations only exacerbated the suffering of the Iraqi people. Basic necessities such as food, water, and medical supplies were scarce, leading to a humanitarian crisis of immense proportions. The once bustling cities were now ghost towns, a stark testament to the devastation of war. Moreover, the tensions in the region did not dissipate with the end of the conflict. Instead, they simmered beneath the surface, like a dormant volcano waiting to erupt. The war had not resolved the deep-seated issues that had led to the conflict in the first place. The borders remained contentious, religious and ethnic divisions persisted, and the quest for power and control continued unabated. The legacy of Operation Desert Storm was far-reaching, influencing not just the Middle East, but also the entire world. It marked a shift in U.S. foreign policy, ushering in a new era of interventionism. The swift victory bolstered the perception of the American military as an unbeatable force, a perception that would shape the nation's approach to conflicts in the years to come. However, the war also served as a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict. The images of destruction and suffering etched a lasting impression on the global consciousness, prompting calls for peace and diplomacy over military aggression. In the broader context, Operation Desert Storm was a catalyst for change. It altered the geopolitical landscape, set precedents for international military intervention, and triggered a re-evaluation of the role of power in global politics. Operation Desert Storm was a pivotal moment in history, shaping the course of the Middle East and the world for years to come.